When word got out about Splatoon's eerie noises that play after the final boss fight, I just had to get a taste of this. Since I love this game and everything it offers, I couldn't resist trying to see it myself. One boot up and the final boss fight later, I was ready for what was in store, or so I thought. Once the fight was over, I stood in one spot and listened to those hellish noises. I got bored of standing in one spot and decided to walk around the level a bit. There wasn't much to do. If I went too far, I would die, so I headed back to where the Zapfish was. Instead, I was greeted by something odd. The platform that the Zapfish was on was deformed, and the Zapfish was gone. The platform almost looked as if it had a giant bite taken out of it. Since the Zapfish was the only way out of the level, I tried jumping down the pit that held the Zapfish. The light valve was broken. It's similar to when you break it yourself, and the fake Zapfish was lying not too far from it. When I tried walking towards it, the platform began to shriek as it began to lose its balance. I quickly grabbed the Zapfish and was set to the onward screen, but instead of my character holding the Zapfish as it normally would, it was facing away from the screen, staring off into the distance, almost as if it was looking for something. When I left the boss kettle, a message appeared at the top of the screen, to the next area. This was impossible. There were only 5 areas. How could they bring another one? After following the arrow, I realized it was taking me back to the first area, but this time, it was different. Instead of the only 3 levels in a boss kettle, there was an extra level, and all of the kettles were already found. Unlike how you have to find them when you first enter a new biggest area, it's like Captain Cuttlefish and DJ Octavio was gone. The entrance to Ingopolis and the small hut were also missing, so it was just me and the kettles. Another difference was that this area was very beat up looking, almost if it was falling apart. Continuing, I walked to each of the kettles to see what the levels' names were. They read Flutter, Scrapyard, Unfindable Flying Objects, and Octoling Hideout. Simply question mark for the boss kettle. I decided to start with the Flutter level since they tend to be the most annoying and I just wanted to get it done with it. I jumped into the kettle equally excited and scared for what I would be greeted with. When the level finally loaded, I was greeted with no music and the sound of a subtle breeze. Unlike the many other levels, the background was brown instead of the white night sky of a blue sky. Even more to my surprise, a text box from Agent 1 came up. Is this where they take all of their broken machines? This question was quickly followed up with Agent 2 saying, I suppose so. This conversation continued for a little bit, but I ignored it. I wanted to explore this strange level. When I looked around, I noticed tons of broken down floaters. They were just dumped everywhere. As I walked past them, I noticed that some of them have flickering eyes as they slowly break down. A few of them actually pointed lasers at me as I walked past, the same they do when they spot you in normal levels. I was forced to walk in a straight line as all of my other paths were blocked off by broken machines. After walking for about a minute, I saw the Zapfish. This time, it was a real Zapfish. I grabbed it and was sent to the onward screen. It was the same as last time, my inkling looking off into the distance, looking for something. The next level I headed for was Octoling Hideout, since these levels tend to be easy. But once I tried to enter the stage, it wouldn't let me. Instead of jumping into the kettle, I just sat on top of it in squid form. Another message from Agent 1 appeared on the bottom of the screen. It's locked. Bummer. Naturally, a message from Agent 2 soon followed. Don't worry, Agent 1. I'll fix it. So that level was out of the question. I headed to the only other available level, Unfindable Flying Objects. Upon entering the level, I was met with another odd sight. Instead of playing the normal cutscene of the camera focusing on the Octo Striker, it panned over the level like it does when entering a turf war. The level was Arowana Mall, and as the camera panned over the level, I noticed that the UFO in the Octo Striker usually was on the ground in the middle of the stage. All of the water in the level was replaced with Octo ink, and there were a few small streams of the ink branching out from the pools. I headed through the pathway at the right of the stage until I reached the middle of the stage. There was an ink trail connecting the right pathway to the left pathway, but I decided to closer investigate the crash. Once I got close to the crash, I noticed something grim. Under the UFO, there were two reddish objects. It didn't take me long to realize that the Octo Striker was crushed under the UFO, and the pool of ink it was pouring out of it. I quickly got out of the area and headed to the other side of the level. There was no Zapfish this time, but another broken light bulb. I touched it and got the same onward screen. When I exited the level, I got another message appeared at the bottom of the screen from Agent 1. Still no luck on the kettle, and as suspected, a message from Agent 2 followed. But we have opened the boss kettle. Why don't you go there first? Looks like I have no choice. I headed into the boss kettle, expecting Octo Stamp, but I got something entirely different. When the level loaded, I was already in the arena. In the middle, it was a volcano-like enemy. The title of the level was Erupting Octo Geyser. I walked up to the enemy and the activation cutscene played. The boss battle was pretty basic. Blobs of Octo ink shot out of the top of it, and you had to throw a slap bomb into it, similar to the Octo Maw. Once I beat the boss, it exploded like normal, but this time it exploded into Octo ink instead of the ink color you were using. Once everything settled, I noticed a large pit where the boss used to be, and lumps on the ground under the ink. I ignored it at first, but when I started to walk towards the Zapfish, one of these lumps were right in my way. I tried to walk around it, but I noticed it was a strange shape. Upon further investigation, I realized that these lumps were similar to the ones I have seen in the previous level. I was confused. Why were these here? Were they dead Octarians? And why did they only appear after I beat the boss? I wanted to ignore these questions, but I also needed answers. I walked towards the Zapfish, when I noticed it was above the pit. Instead of grabbing the Zapfish, I jumped down the pit with immediate regrets. There were many Octo Troopers down there, and they all looked like the lumps from above. They looked pretty normal, except that they weren't on the little scooters and they had no pupils. Worst of all, the colors were faded. There's no doubt that they met, and early in the middle of the pit there was a jump point. I hurried to it to get out of this horrid scene. I grabbed the Zapfish and left the level with no intention of going back. I jumped out of the kettle and I was greeted by another message from Agent 1. Good news! We got the kettle open! Agent 2 followed with another message, but it wasn't what I thought it would be. Are you okay, Agent 3? You look rather pale. This surprised me. My Inkling actually looked horrified from the scene before, like she was in as much shock as I was. Normally I would shrug this off, but I couldn't. This has gone too far. But I had come too far to give up now. One more kettle, one more level, and I would never have to do this again. I headed for the final level in the area, Octoling Hideout. I entered the level, and it looked very out of place for this happy-go-lucky game. It looked like a large abandoned building. There was no ceiling, only a large black void. And again, no music. But this time, all that played were those hellish noises from the final boss, but loud and clear. I also noticed a flashing sign when I entered. It read, Warning, power low, Zapfish backup failed. It didn't take me long to come to the conclusion that the area and levels looked so empty and barren because the Octarians' power was almost out. Their cities were falling apart. Were we the enemies all along? Before I could move, a large metal structure came crashing down. It was one of those tentacles from the final boss. We were directly under the area where the final boss takes face, explaining why there was no roof to be seen. It hit me. Those noises at the end of the final boss were the sounds of metal falling, and the crushing, helpless Octoling and Octarian troops. No, that was impossible. Nintendo would never do something like that, right? I shook off the horrible thought and started walking through the level, trying to avoid every robotic tentacle that came crashing down. I walked until I saw a message pop up from Agent 1. All I read was, "The last one." The last what? I looked around until I noticed a small red blur in the distance, an Octoling facing a large, dark void that seemed to go on forever. Is this what Agent 1 meant by the last one? Was this the last surviving Octoling? Out of curiosity, I tried to make my way up to her, but once I got too close, she super jumped away. But when she super jumped away, there wasn't a purple trail behind her. Just then, Agent 2 added, "And there she goes." Ignoring this message, I walked up to where she was standing before, and I noticed a pair of Octoling boots. Why were these here? Why? Were these from the Octoling before? I ignored this too and decided to carry on, but before I could, I was greeted by a message from both Agent 1 and Agent 2, and simply read, "Watch out!" Before I could react, a robotic tentacle fell onto my player. Despite having 3 respawns left, I was taken to the splat screen. After that, I was brought to the character select screen that you see when you first buy the game. After a minute of confusion, it hit me. My character had died. I reset the console after that, and when I booted up the game, all ran as normal. I wanted to check to see if this was something that would happen again, but I never wanted to repeat this incident. I never want to see my colorful, happy game turn that dark ever again.